Okay, good morning. Let us continue from where we stopped or where we were stopped yesterday when the call got cut and we had to stop midway through our discussion on writing for films. After our discussion on writing for the web, we moved on to writing for films and we talked about the three stages of a film's production: the pre-production stage, the production stage, and the post-production stage. And we discovered how there is a great deal that a writer can contribute in each one of these stages. We saw the preparatory work that goes into the pre-production stage and the creation of the all-important script or the screenplay based on the story that again would have been written by someone. So you need to be familiar with the terms that are used, the jargon, the technical terms that are associated with the screenplay and generally writing for film. So there are a lot of terms, new terms, short forms and so on, which your textbook very clearly defines. So please do go through the textbook and watch the recording of yesterday's class as well. Then we've talked about the production stage, the act of the shooting of the movie, where the screenplay and the storyboard play a very important role in keeping things focused. And without that, without the clear directions given by the screenplay and the clear visualization given by the script and the images in the storyboard, the making of the film would be an arduous task and almost an impossible one indeed. So now we will move to the post-production stage and look at the writing that is involved in the post-production stage. So allow me to make the presentation. Right. So the post-production refers to that stage after the production when the film is completed and you have the very important task of editing the visual and the audio material. You have a lot of footage that has been compiled and now the task is to choose the best to create a coherent film. So it refers to all those tasks associated with cutting. As I told you, even though we do not have the physical cutting of the films, the celluloid today, we still refer to it as cutting and removing or editing out, and then putting all that together and then adding the sound, the music and visual effects and so on. Right, so on the right side of the slide, you can see the stages, all those post-production stages where again there is so much more work to be done, particularly with writing, the picture editing, the directions that are to be given for the editing, the sound editing, ADR and Foley, I'll explain those terms, music, mixing the sound, visual effects, color correction, the titles, adding the titles, the graphics, and then gathering the materials together for distribution, and finally to advertise the film, where you need to make a catchy poster and important, a trailer. You need a script for the trailer. You should know what is to be highlighted in the trailer, what are the sounds that should go into the trailer. Again, a great deal of writing is involved in that. So let's begin with editing, and as in the previous stages of production, you have a whole lot of terminology to be familiar with. Editing is of course a process of taking all the raw footage, the scene after scene after scene that has been shot, and then selecting the best from them, finally combining them to create the film, the motion picture. So one of the most important terms used in it is cut, a cut between one shot and the other. That is what is referred to as a cut. And there are different ways in which this cut would be presented. The screenplay or in the post-production directions, this would be clearly indicated. How does one shot transition to another? A transition where one shot is instantly followed by another. Sometimes you have it in the form of a fade, sometimes you have it in the form of a, an encircled image, something, what is the kind of cut, the transition from one shot to the other. That has to be clearly written down and indicated in the directions. Then a few terms associated with cutting, with editing, for example, continuity editing. It's a kind of visual editing where the shots are cut together in a clear and linear flow so that you get a feel of uninterrupted action. And this type of cutting seeks to maintain a continuous sense of time and space. When the film needs to convey that, continuity editing is used. On the other hand, it may be cross-cutting. For certain other situations, you have cross-cutting where you have the same two storylines being presented at the same time, and rapidly you cut between one and the other. To refer to a very humorous incident, you can think of that situation where ivide palagachal, avide thalikettu, palagachal, thalikettu, and that kind of transition between one and the other, two storylines moving parallelly, and then that is what is known as cross-cutting. So continuity editing gives you a sense of something that flows without any break. Cross-cutting can juxtapose two storylines together. Then you have a jump cut, an abrupt cut that creates a lack of continuity between shots by leaving out parts of the action. This again is a technique used as a form of storytelling. Suppose you want to convey a very fast-paced narrative. There is a lot that is not said at all, and you quickly transition to something else, leaving a lot unsaid. So the editing is something that takes the story of the movie forward. Technology taking the story forward in its own way. And we should be familiar with the 5 major stages of editing. The first stage, where you have all those shots that have been shot, all those scenes that have been shot, that is what is known as the first assembly. And the editor of, the one who puts all these together has to consider every shot, every visual and audio material, and you have that first assembly, the entire collection. And then that has to be reordered. From that you need to choose and then reorder them. What you get in that stage is what is known as a rough cut, where the scenes are placed in a specific order and checked for continuity to ensure that there is continuity. Yeah, you are left now with what is known as the rough cut. The all important step in the editing process allows for revisions, and sometimes you may have new ideas. You feel that something is missing there, and that may be shot. Then from the rough cut you reach the first cut. The rough cut that is accepted by the editor and the director and the producer. That is what is known as the first cut. The editor has done his or her work on the rough cut and it is presented to the director and the producer, and that first okayed series is what is known as the first cut. And the selection and sequence are basically fixed, and still it's open for change. Only then do you move towards the fine cut, where you look at individual shots and scenes, and it emphasizes and strengthens the rhythms and structures identified in the first cut. And it is in the final cut that you look at the whole thing comprehensively. When a fine cut has been agreed with, the director, the writer, producer, sound designer, music composer, all of them, they join the editor, and finally you have the whole thing being added, compiled together, and you have what is then sent for distribution and for screening is what is known as the final cut. So editing is something that goes through these 5 stages, and you can imagine how this can again be done perfectly only if you have clearly written down instructions. So this is also part of writing for films. Yeah. And when sound is mixed, that is also part of the editing stage. We need to be familiar with a few terms like Sync sound we've already seen. It is during the production stage that you may have sync sound. To create that kind of authenticity in a film, you definitely need on-site recording. That is what is known as sync sound. But in the post-production stage, you may either have automated dialogue replacement. The dialogue that was spoken by the actors during the shot may very often be unclear. And then what do? They come back to the recording studio and read those lines. The visuals are played on the screen, and they read, they record those lines to give it the kind of impact that the final film requires. So that is what is known as automated dialogue replacement, ADR. So you have to be familiar with some of these short forms as well, ADR, automated dialogue replacement. Now, apart from dialogue, a film gains in life only when you have all those background sounds. And if the sync sound has not been able to capture all the background sounds well, again you have another sound artist. That is a person known as the Foley artist. Somebody like Rasool Pukutti. You can think of somebody like that who records a lot of sounds, recreates these, creates sounds using all kinds of innovative ways, and then adds them to the film. If you have visited any studio, any recording studio, you will see the way in which sound is created. If anybody has been to the Ramoji Film City in Hyderabad, there they will show you how a film is made. It's a trip worth taking. They often show the filming of Sholay and the creation of sound for some of the most significant scenes in that movie. And you have that scene where Hema Malini is riding her Basanti, that horse cart, and as she is going, she is being followed by the dacoits. And to create that sense of drama and tension, the way the sound is added, the sound of the horse. Very often when the horse is racing, when the horse is moving at great speed, it will not be possible to capture the sound in its entirety. So what they do is use a lot of pebbles, put it in a tub, and then stir it around in such a way, with great speed, in such a way that the sound of the horse hooves is recreated. Similarly, for thunder, you would have seen in certain movies, you swish an X-ray film like this, and you definitely get the sound of thunder. That is, when it is captured by a good enough mic. So all of this is the work of a Foley artist. Right, so that is sound, but with sound and music, again, the film is not complete these days unless you have VFX, visual effects. Again, a film does not have the kind of impact that we are today familiar with. So you have a lot of engineers and computer generated images being added by them. CGI, computer generated imagery, VFX, visual effects. Then the next stage, or the final stage of the post-production, where the movie has to reach the audience. And you've seen the various innovative ways in which movies are announced. Today, with the arrival of OTT, you have different ways of announcing the movie. But remember, each poster, each trailer, again, is a creative work. It involves as much creativity as the making of the whole movie itself. Again, there is a script that a trailer needs. There is a great deal of thinking, innovative thinking, that goes into the creation of a very catchy poster. So I think we'll close our discussion on writing for feature films there. Again, visualizing the great opportunities that are available for you in that field. It's a whole world out there. Now, closely aligned with the feature film, you consider a feature film as something, a movie that is at least 90 minutes long. Anything less than that is considered as a short film. Okay, 90 minutes is normally what is considered as the length of a feature film. Less than that is a short film. But these feature films, whether it's a short film or a feature film, they are always, works of fiction. They may be based on a real incident, but it is always an a work of imagination that is presented as the film. On the other hand, you have a different category of films known as the documentary film, and that is something that we need to discuss. A documentary film has great significance. It is a non-fictional motion picture intended to convey or to document reality, primarily to teach for the purpose of instruction, education, and very often to maintain a historical record. I'm sure you're familiar with documentary films. You can think of a documentary on your college. You can think of a documentary on, in recent times, a documentary film that was much, that has been discussed, or that is, is very much in the news, is the Social Network. Isn't that so? Yeah, that's, it's a kind of The Social Dilemma. The Social Dilemma. Yeah, it's a documentary film. It's not a feature film, but it's a very long documentary film. Daughters of India, another very controversial documentary film. So you can have a documentary on the Silent Valley, for example. You can have a documentary on a person, a writer, anyone, anything, anyone. And so the word documentary there is used in such a way. It comes from the word document, which means to teach. Docere in Latin means to teach. That is where you get the word documentary from. So that is precisely the purpose of a documentary film. While a feature film is maybe meant for entertainment, it may also teach, but its primary aim is entertainment. Whereas a documentary film is used to document, to teach, to convey important facts. So, there are certain specific features of a documentary film. You can think of a film as a documentary film only if it has these added things to give it authenticity. It does not move. Of course, it needs a script. You cannot have a documentary, you cannot make a documentary film without the idea of a story, without a screenplay. That has also got to be written, and that should also indicate where the scene should be shot, how it should be shot, what kind of lighting is to be used, and what other features should be added. Everything has to be clearly indicated in the screenplay. And a documentary would very often have a voice over, unlike the feature film, which moves, the camera is the narrator there. But here, apart from the camera, very often you have a voice over also, somebody who talks in the background. The Silent Valley project, so and so and so on. That voiceover is a very important part of the documentary. It's something that sets the documentary apart from feature films. I put up a table there which helps us to identify the differences between the feature film and the documentary film. So it's an accurate representation of real events. And the filmmaker, even if he or she may have an agenda, does not have the freedom to falsify the situations. It passes through a censor board itself, and even when you want to convey, you want to convey the damages caused by a factory, for example, to a river, and you make a documentary on that, you are definitely conveying a political message, but you have not falsified anything. You have not, put the name of the factory as another name. You have indicated that the effluence or the outflow from this factory is responsible for the pollution of this river. So you have the real events, real people, real situations being depicted in an accurate manner. And your aim should be to instruct, to educate, to inspire sometimes the audience. A documentary film on a person, sometimes you have anyone, it's so inspiring on a dancer, on a performer, and so on. It deals with reality and usually made on a lower budget than the feature films, which of course run into crores of rupees. You may have recorded actions, but unlike the feature film, which is fully scripted, here you may have a lot of live action too. You may catch people going to work. They are not acting in front of the camera. They're doing their work and the camera is capturing it live for the sake of the documentary film. And then you use real people and real locations. You do not get people to enact the role of somebody. No, here you are, you. And the interviews that you have with these real people. That is again another integral feature of a documentary, much like the voice-over. It adds authenticity, it adds that first-hand account to a documentary. You do not have a plot here, a plot which moves either in a linear or non-linear manner in a feature film. The plot is all important. You may have a story and that story has to be carried forward in a particular way. But here you have a story to tell but no plot. And you depend a lot on archival footage also to add authenticity to it. What has already been shot, what is already available, newspaper clippings, clippings from magazines, snippets from an old film and so on. All of these are from the archives, and adding these shots, images and so on from the archives adds authenticity to a documentary. So that's about the documentary. And one last topic that the textbook intends you to discuss is the newsreel. I don't know if you've even heard of something called the newsreel. I do not know why the textbook has added the newsreel also to discussion. It is not seen at all these days. There was a time when we grew up, I still remember when we went to a theatre, which was only maybe once in a year, once in 2 years or so. But one inevitable part of the movie experience would be this news review. That is, the screening would begin with the presentation based on some news item of the recent times. For example, it could be the inauguration of a dam by the Prime Minister of the country. It could be the visit of a foreign dignitary. It could be a Republic Day parade, or it could be some natural calamity. So, we did not have television then, so we would not have 24/7 action replayed for you, real action, whatever is happening in any part of the world today, you see them on the television screen. But those days, we only had newspapers, and to give a visual expression to these news items, you had filmmakers who made these newsreels. They were documentaries, but then you only had real, it was based on something that was happening, something that had news value, unlike a documentary which can be made on anything at all. So that is what is known as a newsreel. It's a short documentary film that was based on news stories, items of topical interest and so on. And it was particularly popular till the arrival of television in a big way. So till the 1970s, you had the reign of the news reel. And they were largely presented in cinema theatres. Sometimes, there were a few pockets in the country which had television, and there also on television also they would show these news reviews, because they would have news telecasts only once a day. You did not have it throughout the day as you have it now. So that's about the newsreel. Again, the newsreel today has great significance because you can go back to it as archival footage. It has great documentary value. That is the only reason, I guess, why it has been included in the textbook. You do not make newsreels, but there are other, documentaries, television programs and so on, which today serve the purpose that was at that time performed by the newsreel. Okay, so with that we will close our discussion on writing for the media. We have talked about writing for the web and writing for films. You have a whole lot of terminology to be familiar with, so please go through these sections: writing for film in the textbook and writing for the web. Okay, and watch these videos as well for added information. I think the textbook itself is your best source for information on this paper. You will not need to stretch yourself further. But that does not mean that it is in any way insignificant. It's something that can actually inspire you a great deal, because there's so much that, it's a kind of career guidance, I would say, this paper. It indicates the avenues that are open to you where you can contribute with your writing skills. Okay, so now I think I've completed writing for the media. Now some work remains to be done in the world classics